I'm Kelly Lewis.
And I'm Tiffany Jones, and we're your Revenue Insiders.
If you're enjoying the Revenue Insiders, we'd love your support. Follow us, rate, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners like you. Hello. We are joining you the day after the first Revenue Insiders networking dinner. Tiffany and I, if you are watching us on video, we might look a little tired. We both go to bed around 9:30. We were up till 11 last night. It was a very successful event. People stayed, closed down the place. It was awesome. So we're coming to you after that. We did plan the event the first night of the NCAA tournament, and people showed up anyway.
Yeah.
So great. Really awesome. But today I am so excited to have Darren Brady, VP of Sales at RevShop. Darren and I go way back. He has sold to me multiple times at multiple companies. He was in sales at Corporate Visions, with, if you're not aware, is a big methodology. And he's always just been a great partner and someone outside of just the vendor-client relationship, is someone I've sought to talk about thought leadership when it comes to go-to-market. You talk to companies all over the world every day. And so you just have all of these amazing, unique perspectives that I'm excited for you to share with our audience. So Darren, thank you for being here. I know you and Tiffany haven't met yet.
Yeah. Good. This is we're meeting as we're talking, so it's fantastic.
That's great. Well, it's going to be a good one.
Darren, I'd love to dive right in then. Like Kelly said, we're just meeting for the first time. And one of the things that we were kind of all chatting about was sales leadership and really around like EQ versus IQ. And I'd love to just kind of pick your brain on what your thoughts are in that space.
Yeah, that's a hot topic. I feel like I've had conversations around intellectual intelligence and emotional intelligence a lot throughout my career. And when I've led sales teams and obviously been on sales teams, it's one of the tougher pieces to manage, right? Because you have folks that are really, really deep into product and can understand product really well. And then you have folks that are more, can read the room and tell a story really well, but may not be as detailed into the product. And it's a tough thing to balance in the sales world, right? You want to make sure that you're giving your team the information they need to be both, right? To be confident in both, but it's tough to manage. And so it's an interesting piece because I, as a leader, wasn't very good at that when I was a sales leader. I struggled with it. I had a few people that they knew the product like the back of their hand and, struggled with the emotional piece. And I struggled managing that emotional piece. And so it's been something that as I've progressed in my career, I continue to talk about is the importance of, as a leader, not necessarily hammering either. I don't think you necessarily need to pull them both, but being able to pull out of folks what they're good at, right? And putting them in situations to be able to excel. So if they do have a high IQ, then how do I get them in a place where they can shine about the product or about the service, whatever it looks like. If they're really high on the EQ piece and can read a room or have a great conversation around things, how do I get them in a situation where they're excelling at storytelling, right? Because that's ultimately what sales are. It's storytelling and product knowledge. That's where we come in from a sales perspective. And so I love that topic. I'm passionate about it. If anybody out there listening wants to have a conversation, I would love to talk about it because it's an interesting piece that, to be honest, I wasn't good at as a manager. But as I've progressed in my career, it just is a glaring piece that I feel like a lot of sales leaders tend to miss out on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So in general,
we at HighSpot, actually, during a sales leadership event, we did a big EQ survey. So everyone does the DISC surveys, or, they have all the ones about your personality, but we actually did one that was just focused on EQ. And we got a lot of eye rolls at first because they're like, okay, you want me to take like a 20-minute survey about my EQ? This isn't going to tell me anything. And it was fascinating. So we had this company come in and then digest everyone's individual results. And then they went into working groups on what they're really strong at and they need to lean into, plus the areas that they need to focus on. And I think we all walked away with, my gosh, I didn't know this about myself. Or I think I called Tiffany after mine. Mine was I really bad at? I called you
I remember that call, but I don't remember what it was. It was something
It
that I
was
was like,
something about anxiety, and like I was high in anxiety and I was also high in anticipation,
yes.
Mm.
which I think are, and we were joking because I was like, I think those things are very tied together. If I'm
So
really good at
interesting.
anticipating what's about to happen, I have a lot of anxiety in my life. But so they teach you kind of how to work on those things. And then they teach you areas that you could have higher EQ. So Darren, I love this. I think if you're a sales leader, it's worth spending time thinking about what you're good at and where you should focus.
It's interesting because when I first joined sales, right, this was like back in the old school, we had a pit, right, and the ringing gongs and the old school days. I remember in my first few months on the job, the company that I worked for, it was a large company. They brought in an outside vendor to do exactly that, Kelly. We did like an emotional intelligence type motion of it was more of a learning. And I thought at the time that I was like, well, they're just trying to figure out how to manage me, right? That's all it was.
Mhm.
All right, there's a
You thought
reason
they were
behind it.
trying to
Like
perfect.
like they're trying to just like kind of figure out like what drives me, right? But no, it ended up being a super important part of my career to where I started to understand to your point, Kelly, like where are my gaps and where do I struggle with that, right? Or where can I get better and how can I seek things? And actually, there was some advice motions through it as well. And I think that it's a piece that I'm not saying we have to go back to the days of what's your why, right? I don't think we have to go back that far, but I do think as a leader, like it's important to start to understand where people sit and being able to support them in that from an IQ and an EQ perspective.
I've done executive coaching where they talk about as a leader, like having you have like a bunch of tools in your tool belt, and you might be really good at and you gravitate towards the tools you're really comfortable with, but you have to get good at like all of the tools because sometimes you need other ones. And so having that like emotional intelligence layer and understanding that about yourself just helps you so much as a leader to then lean into like how you have to think about other people and how you coach them. So it's a huge.
I'll give you a good example on that one. I actually, Tiffany was back in my early days, led a sales team, and we used to do a daily meeting, an office meeting, everyone twice actually, morning and afternoon, and you'd have to talk in front of the room, right?
Yeah.
I would like shake, like literally would be shaking, talking.
I can't imagine
I
that.
know.
I feel like it hurts all the time.
I would black out. I would shake. I would be sweating. It was the craziest thing. And I remember we actually did this specific motion that I was talking about of doing some with an outside vendor. And it was such a weak area for me that I was like, I'm going to attack this. Like, this is an area I've got, if I want to be a sales leader, which was my goal, I've got to figure out how to fill that gap. Right. And so I started intentionally working with my boss at the time to put myself in spots where I had to talk. And over time, I got comfortable with it, learned tips, tricks, right? But it was an area that I wouldn't have probably found out if we hadn't gone through that motion. And I definitely wouldn't have attacked it the way that I had if my boss hadn't been on the journey with me. And so it ultimately exposed an area that, to your point, Kelly, like, I mean, last week I was in Vancouver speaking to a large sales team. Right. And to think that, years ago, I would sweat talking in front of 15, 20 people and go, get super anxious around it. It's kind of wild. So I do think there's a lot of benefit of just being very transparent and being able to understand where you sit. And then as a leader, being able to help people overcome those gaps.
That's great. I'm a little upset that you were in Vancouver and didn't come say hi. We're in Seattle. We're so close.
I know. It was a
Knew that
quick
was
trip.
coming. So next time you're in Seattle, you have to stop by. Tiffany, one thing that I'd love to hear from you, because I experienced this. I think as you grow in your career, your skills and EQ change.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I think the best leaders do is actually understand of their direct reports who makes up for their differences.
Mm-hmm.
And so on my team, I've always had directors reporting to me that do certain things really well that I know I don't do well. And I'm actually really vocal about it to the entire team. So that I'm acknowledging like this is a weakness, but good for all of you. In my case, it was Annie or someone else. Like Annie's really great at this. So
Yeah.
like she's filling
Yeah.
this gap for me. And I want you to just know I'm aware and I'm learning.
Yeah, I think it's a huge mistake that we make, and as leaders, and it's a lack of emotional intelligence that honestly leads to it in most cases, where like you feel like as a leader you should be able to do everything and do everything really well. And like, it's this idea of like, you get to almost like a director level being a superhuman. Like, you do all the things, you say yes to all the things that gets you to probably director level max. And then to get over director level, this emotional intelligence really kicks in. You have to be able to discern and say like no to things or prioritize and communicate that. And I think the really good leaders, lots of people make it above director that aren't good at this, but really good leaders can look into themselves and say, I'm not good at these types of tasks, or I don't have experience in these types of things. And you fill your leadership team in a way that people can learn from each other, but they fill gaps not only in things like these emotional intelligence type tests and like the different things people are good at, but like even the skill sets. Like, I don't have a lot of experience in forecasting. It just wasn't part of like how I came up through my career. And super critical, I hire a leader that like excels in that space in my realm. And like, I'm not going to pretend that I'm fantastic at it. I'm going to raise my hand and say like, I need a resource that can go do this because I'm not excellent at it. And if you want my team to be, then that's what I need a resource for. And so I think it plays really well into the emotional intelligence conversation. And it's definitely like, when you think about your own career development, like that's the difference of like a director level and then getting to those next steps is having some of that emotional intelligence, especially outside of the sales leader realm.
That's such an interesting thing because I love that, Tiffany. I think that's a great example of as you progress your career, I've always heard is delegating, but it's not just a delegation, right? It's not just a pushing of things to other people, but it's actually identifying, to your point, the areas that maybe there's someone better that could be doing this and executing on it. And I can guide them as a leader, but I know that I know that they can fill that gap better than I. And I think that's a really good. I think about some of the best leaders that I've had along the way, and specifically had a CEO in my career that, I don't know that he would ever stand up and say, I'm the smartest in the room or I'm the best. Like, he didn't have that aura to him. It was very much a humble leader, but he surrounded himself with people that were really good in their functional roles. And I think that to your point, as you grow, that your emotional intelligence gets to a place where you can fill those gaps with folks that have that higher competency.
So, Darren, we have a ton of parents that are listeners and also have go-to-market roles. You became a dad in the last couple of years. You jumped on and said you had hand, foot, and mouth. I am
Goodness.
so sorry. I have also gotten hand, foot, and mouth for
I
my
have
kids,
not.
and it was the worst
The
experience
worst.
of my entire life. I thought I
No,
was going to die. So can you, I'm glad you survived hand, foot, and mouth. You are scarred for life. I'm sorry. It's just
I am,
the
yes.
truth. Hopefully you never get it again. But curious, as you transitioned into fatherhood in a sales role, like what's changed about how you look at work in your go-to-market role now that you're a dad?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for those listening, we're on a train of flu and hand, foot, and mouth and norovirus. And I mean, we're on a back-to-back motion right now. Yeah, we're in it. We're deep in it. But I think the biggest piece is like being able to put myself in a position to where I can be really great at what I'm doing when I need to be there, right? So if it's work, right, 9 to 5, putting myself in a position to be able really like being able to focus, but then after 5, I'm a dad, right? I'm there for my son, and I'm fortunate at RevShop with the leadership team that we have. I actually my being a dad, our president of the business is in a very similar situation where he's a dad and he gets it, right? Like he's like, hey man, go be with your son, right? Like, it's nice. Is it nice there this afternoon? Go take him for a walk, all right? Like we have those level of conversations, and I've never had that before. Thankfully, I'm in a situation that does have that. But my advice is to try to put yourself in a situation where you can have that level of support around, because I think it's, especially to your point, Kelly, when you have hand, foot, mouth, you're not really up for being on meetings, right? Like those meetings got canceled, and so have the support around me that I'll give you another couple of examples. We had our sales kickoff a few weeks ago, and our CEO and the founders are super dedicated to having our team kickoff in special places. They do a really good job of having it in unique places. So this year it was in Lisbon, Portugal, which is like absolutely fantastic spot to have a team kickoff.
Where do
I
I
was
apply?
I was in Dallas.
You right? Well, that was the week I got hand, foot, mouth, right?
Wow.
And so the team was super understanding, and actually went out of their way to make sure that the remote experience was aligned so that I could be involved. And I think that's super important. And so they do a really great job of just like, I'm fortunate to have a situation where my team knows when I'm on for work, I'm on for work. They also understand when I've got my dad hat on, I've got to have my dad hat on. Right. And I think that that's such an important piece. And as a leader, being able to have that empathy, because I was there before, right? Like I when I led a sales team, I had people on my team that had kids, and I probably wasn't as empathetic as I would be now, right? And so I think it's just an important conversation that we keep having, because if you don't have kids, or maybe had kids years ago, like it's just hard to relate in that instance. But I feel like I the more we talk about it and bring awareness to it and just being supportive in that motion, I think it's super important, because it's not easy, right? I think it's not easy to go from building a proposal or doing this to going to the daycare and my son throwing up on me and like that. Like, it's tough to be able to change hats really quickly, but I appreciate the support that I have around me. And I think it's just a super important conversation in today's world, especially as like Zoom. It's different, right? I was talking to a friend yesterday about like, imagine like I didn't have a kid during COVID. Kelly, I remember we used to be on calls and like kids running around in the background. Like that was real. And that's
pee in the background, pull down her pants and pee on the floor in the middle
I
of the Zoom
remember,
call.
I think you text me after that. You're like, I'm at the end of my rope.
Yeah. You just get a different level of respect for it as you're in it. But I think it's such an important piece in today's world, as people are working from home or kids are out sick. It doesn't matter. In today's world, the reality is like my kid's more ingrained in like he could be here right now, right? Like if I got a call and he had a fever, I got to go. And so I think it's an important, super, super important conversation.
Yeah. I think it totally goes back to the emotional intelligence though, too, as like a leader, like being able to manage the people, whether you're a parent or not, and can have the level of empathy that maybe we do on a call for like a hand, foot, and mouth situation. Being able to think about your people as like whole individuals whose life does not start and end at 9 to 5, but like things happen in between, and like looking at like the bigger picture of like, are you growing in your career? Are you getting the things done that you need to get done? Looking, instead of looking at the micromanage, like, did you show up to these meetings? Did you get this task done at this exact time? Like, there's a level of emotional intelligence, I think, that like leaders who are good in that space, even if they're not parents and have empathy, have to develop to lead that way.
That's a great connection.
So you're at RevShop, Darren, which is, tell us a little bit about RevShop. But the thing I really actually want to focus on is you get to talk to go-to-market leaders across the world every day. Most of us don't get to do that. What are you hearing? What are they talking about? What is broken right now that they're all trying to solve?
Yeah. So at RevShop, we're focused on helping organizations get the most out of their sales technology investments. So over the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of organizations spend a lot on their sales technology.
Maybe too much.
And do what?
Too much.
Maybe a little too much. Maybe a little fat there. But now organizations are taking a look at like, hey, how do we spend our money, and are we getting the return on investment, right? We're spending this money on sales technology. Is it working? And so we work with organizations to help them. We have a specific point of view that to do that, you need to link technology, content, people, and data. And when you do that effectively, you can drive outcomes. And if you connect the technology towards the sales motion, you align content to that sales motion, you enable folks around that sales motion, and you report out on that sales motion, you can have a very clear view to make business decisions. And so it's an interesting space because, to your point, sales leaders around the world are taking a look at this and making business decisions and making cuts, adds, it depends. And it's evolving. AI is coming into the picture. So that's a big topic in today's world. Utilization, right? Are we even using this tool? Are we getting anything out of it? Yeah. So it's an interesting space in today's world.
I do think in that lens of like, are you using all of your tools and aligning things to the sales methodology or sales process? Like what I really hear you saying is like, are you prioritizing? Like, are you stopping? At one point we were all chasing the big shiny thing, and it's kind of popping up again with all these like really neat AI tools. And we've been talking to a lot of them, but at the end of the day, like just like everything in sales and go to market, you have to focus, you have to prioritize for like things to have an impact. And so that's great. Like I haven't worked with RevShop before, but it's a super important part of like how we think about our tool set for sure.
Yeah, it's you bring up a really interesting point of, I feel like we went through this motion where it was prioritizing the client, right? We got to prioritize and make sure we're reaching the client where they're at. You remember the buyer's journey and deciding journey, whatever journey you want to put to it, but it was very client focused, right? And ultimately, a lot of sales leaders now are starting to look at the sales journey, right? Are our sellers able to effectively sell? Because sales have changed. More digital. We're recording a podcast right now, right? Like we're digital. So sales are the same way. And so as you start to put things under a microscope, what we're finding is that prioritization around how a seller sells just hasn't been there. And so great sales leaders in today's world are putting that at the focus. And to your point, Tiffany, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of like AI on this and optimization on this and what that looks like. But the reality is it's all about making a seller better. That's where it should be focused.
I'd love to understand where you see AI, like you just mentioned it, but like where do you see that fitting in? Like right now, like I think in worst case scenario, every tool is a co-pilot and your sales team is using some version of AI, like in every screen that they have up, and they're telling them conflicting things about like, their conversation intelligence is giving them these insights, and their, the outreach emails that they're sending are giving them these. Like, where do you see AI fitting in like a best practice perspective?
Such a good point. I thought about that the other day. There was a co-pilot or something popped up on mine, and I was like, man, there's like four versions of that same thing as in my day to day. It's kind of wild, right? And none of them are talking, right? None of them are connected. So it's you bring up a really interesting point, and our point of view, and I think it's an interesting point of view is AI is not here to replace right now, right? Like it's just not. We're not in a space to replace sellers, and so any seller that's out there that's worried about that, I think that's been squashed, right? We're good with that. But where AI can help in today's space is specific tasks, right? Helping to take the mundane things out. The way I look at it is it's an accelerant, right? There's information everywhere. We have more information. I have my phone on me all the time, right? Like I have information coming at me all the time. Now, gathering that information, consuming it, and making sense of it so that I can take action on it is a different story. And so the way I view AI is it's an accelerant that can be added to help a seller along the way, not to replace anything, but it's purely, as of today's world, it's information gathering, data processing, right? It's very much focused in that space. Where I think a lot of organizations are missing in AI is that AI has to be put into the sales motion, right? It has to be built specific for a thing inside of how a seller works. And I think a lot of organizations are completely missing that. They're taking AI and, to your point, Kelly, they're just throwing, I think there's one right here actually right now. But like there's just a little bubble on the bottom right. And that's not necessarily, it's great. It's convenient. But what I need it tangibly in a specific piece to help me in a piece of the motion that I'm driving on a day-to-day basis. And I think the organizations that are doing it really well are doing exactly.
I actually had someone make a comment the other day that I actually disagreed with a little, and I can't remember who it was, so I'll obviously not call them out. But they said AI should be so intuitive that they don't need training. And the thing I disagree with in this concept is, yes, from a UI perspective, you should not need training. But I do think, to the point you both talked about earlier, is around prioritization and telling them what AI to pay attention to and what not. They do need training on that.
Yeah.
So if you're not telling them where to focus, they're not going to focus anywhere. Nothing's important.
Well, I think a good piece of it is like using it for a use case, right? So like Kelly with Udly, like that's a great, like, hey, there is a specific motion, right? We're trying to help sellers get really good in specific moments. Perfect motion. People AI, right? Another one that they have a information gathering, right? Where it goes and it pulls all this information and harvests it and puts it in a consumable way for a seller. It's a specific motion. And I get like, those are super tangible to me. I think just kind of kicking it out is doing a disservice. And I think a lot of sales leaders are starting to catch on to that, but I think it's taking a little bit of time to get there, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that's happening in the interim of like go-to-market teams or maybe even RevShop coming in and building this ideal portfolio is you have sellers that are just like out using whatever tool they can get their hands on to fill their gap. And so I think that there's a lot of discovery we can do to learn, like, what are our good reps doing right now? Like, how are they utilizing AI tools on their own? Are they picking up, Kelly, you mentioned a tool we were talking about earlier this week that, like, you just voice to talk and then it writes your emails and makes them better. Like, I'm sure like 3 people on my sales team are doing that now. And it's not even on my radar as something I should provide. But like, if we look at our, what everyone's actually using today, because they're all using AI, everyone is in some capacity, like, it'll help inform, like, to your point, Darren, like, meeting them where they need to be in the sales process and like defining it. Like, they're starting to do that already. And so I think there's discovery you have to do with your own teams as you go down this journey as well.
To pull a few conversations together, I'll never forget during COVID, our CEO, Eric Peterson at Corporate Visions, high EQ guy, and IQ, but high EQ. He knew he had a gap around AI. And he actually created an entire motion inside the organization for people to bring ideas about AI. How are you using AI? And bring it to me. I'm the CEO. I want to know how you're using it, and let's see how it can fit in the business. I think that was a really, really good way that he realized he had a gap, and he created a channel to be able to bring that information to himself. And I think it's a good feedback loop in today's world, because you're right, Tiffany. Sellers are out there signing up for free stuff every day, and who knows how they're using it, right? And so I think once you can start learning of, like, hey, what have you signed up? Show us, right? Maybe there's some benefit to the business. I think that's a really great channel.
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch directions a little bit. The other thing, Darren, that I love chatting with you about is messaging. I'm sure that's because that's how we met. But you always have a really good perspective because you're talking to so many different go-to-market teams. What are companies missing when it comes to messaging? What isn't resonating today, and how are you talking to them about changing their philosophy on that?
Yeah. Messaging is an interesting piece in today's world. We used to have a philosophy of Corporate Visions, and I think it's implanted on my heart for forever. But it's that the best story wins in sales, right? It's not necessarily all about the product. It's not necessarily all about this or that. It's really, as a seller, being able to tell a really good story, and being able to make value tangible to the customer, right? That's the end goal. What I'm finding in today's world, I feel like, there's Challenger, there's Corporate Visions, there's Force, there's all these different organizations and philosophies and things that are out there in today's world. They're all pretty aligned, all right? They all kind of understand that the status quo is out there, right? They have a similar motion around it, speaking to the customer and talking about things that the customer is really focused on. I think those are very important. What I'm finding in today's world is taking that story and holistically spreading it across the business is a completely different motion. Like, building it is important. The skills are important, but getting it adopted and then actually making it tangible and usable for the sellers is a little bit of a different story in today's world. To your point, what we were talking about earlier around AI or different sales tools, there's so many different channels that sellers are using, so many different tools and motions that sellers are using, that it's really hard to control that narrative from the executive team building a value-based messaging story to then getting it into a tool and sellers using it. And so what I'm finding is that's kind of the biggest piece. I don't think organizations in today's world are going, man, I really need my team. I don't think many are like, man, I really need my team to talk about our product all the time. I don't think that's like in today's world. We're beyond that now. I hope we're beyond that now. But what I do hear a lot of organizations have conversations about is, hey, how do we maintain our story? How do we make sure our story is living in all of these tools, and how it's effective, and how do we govern that, and how do we massage it, and how do we get feedback loops so that we can make our story better over time, and what does that look like? And I think that's a big piece of it. But to your point, Kelly, my favorite piece, I do think that sales is storytelling, and I think that's why we're here today, right? Because we're storytelling back and forth, and here we are.
Okay, speaking of stories, this has been a great conversation. I just want to learn, Kelly introed a little bit about you, but like your career journey, like tell me a little bit more about that and what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, so I actually graduated with a bachelor's in chemistry and a minor in biology. So a little bit of a nerd. And I worked as a chemist for a couple of years, and had a buddy that was in the staffing world. And I called him and said, I need a job. I'm done with chemistry. So long story short, I ended up joining a staffing company and got into sales and got up to leading a sales team and enjoyed that. It was fantastic. I learned a ton. As I mentioned earlier, there were some gaps in my leadership style along the way and decided to take a step back and join Corporate Visions actually as a BDR. So not only taking a step back, but a pretty significant step back when I joined Corporate Visions. And so I started as a BDR setting meetings on their enterprise side. There's a couple of guys, Joe Kozub and John Meyer, that I worked with that were absolutely fantastic in helping me learn along the way. And actually got the opportunity at Corporate Visions to start a SMB division. So I started going after mid-market, which was a new motion. They'd never done that before. In that motion, I was fortunate enough to actually meet Kelly, and that was a big piece of this entire motion. Started to grow in my career and learn. And got promoted to our enterprise team. So I sold on our enterprise team for a few years and then made the jump over to RevShop. And really, I think a big piece of why the RevShop team has brought me on is the storytelling piece. Kind of full circle here is I do think it's the storytelling piece. I think sales is storytelling, being able to tell your story in a very concrete way. And so excited for the journey. I think we're in an interesting space, sales technology. Kelly, I think you can agree from your past as well. Sales technology is an interesting space. And so I'm really excited about the future and where we're headed.
So cool, the different stages of your career you've been through, like maybe one of the most varied that we've talked to from that perspective.
Definitely.
Like starting in chemistry is a choice to make it all the way to go to market at RevShop. We're at the point of the episode, we love to ask our guests to leave us, and Kelly and I, but anyone listening, with a question that we should ask ourselves to form our own point of view or to put some thought into. What question would you leave us with?
This is a good one. Question you should ask yourself. It's pretty broad, but like, what's important to you? And I know this is like going back to your why, so I'm not going back that far. But I think one of the pieces as I've grown through my career, we talked about my career progression, is what's been important to me has changed. Right? It's not necessarily the same along the way. And I think it's okay to continue to ask that as you get further into your career. What's important to me? What is that? And I think to Kelly's point earlier, in today's world, it's a little bit of work-life balance, right? It's being able to be present for my son as he's growing and running around and swinging plastic golf clubs that he's left on my desk, right? Like, I think that's important. And if you'd have asked me that 3 years ago, that wasn't the focus, right? And so I think a continuous ask of that is actually an important piece. And how I do that is every year, and this is a New Year's thing, so it's not a year resolution, but every year I write down wins from the year, losses, things that may not have gone well, and I make new goals for the new year. And that's a question that I ask myself: what is important for the year? And it kind of sets a theme. And I think it's a good question to continuously ask yourself.
I love that. Yeah, I think it is.
It resonates with me so much. Just a little bit on my current personal journey. I was debating actually this week about taking a VP of sales role or continuing with my fractional consulting business. And it's been so much back and forth, but I think those moments actually do force you to re-understand what is important to you. And I've found that, like, based on those discussions, I'm re-energized by what I was focused on. So don't be scared if you question it at times. It'll actually put you more securely on your journey.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a great.
I love what you said, Darren, too. And like Kelly, you and I have obviously talked about this week, but it's also okay if what was important to you a week ago is not the same thing this week.
Literally,
you
a week
have
ago.
to be okay with that.
Yeah.
You have to allow that answer is different. But to your point, Darren, you ask yourself and let that sink in. And then maybe it hasn't changed and you realize you're not making the right decision and you need to refocus or re-energize. And maybe it actually has changed even in the course of a week, and just be okay with that. Yeah, it's such great advice.
Okay, Darren, this was so much fun. People are going to want to connect with you. What's the best way to connect with you? And then, of course, RevShop.
Yeah, feel free, LinkedIn. So I think it's hashtag Darren Brady on the back end.
Easy.
So nothing too crazy there. And then from how to connect with RevShop, connect with us on LinkedIn. The team's on there, super active on LinkedIn. You can go through the website as well, revshop.com. And super excited to just make some connections along the way. If you have any questions, anything I said today, would love to have a discussion.
Darren's just a good person to know. I'll tell you that.
I'm excited. We'll have you at the next networking dinner. We do.
Sounds great. Let me know when and where.
Yeah. We'll get you there. Perfect. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If
love your support. Follow us, rate, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners like you.